Namaskar and welcome to our series of programs on unlocking the Indian economy and putting it on the road to economic revival. Our first episode, we're going to look at unlocking demand and looking at specifically at the increase in government spending on infrastructure, putting more money in the hands of government employees, and the demonstration effect the government initiatives will have on the private sector. Taking us through the discussion, we have two very eminent guests. Let me introduce you to them. I've done two one-on-one special interviews with each of them. They are Dr. Arvind Virmani is the president of the Forum for Strategic Initiative and the chairman of the Foundation for Economic Growth. He's been a former chief economic advisor to the Ministry of Finance and a former executive director of the International Monetary Fund. Vidisha Ganguly is the chief economist at the industry body CII. CII, as we know, is a key industry body and it tracks every aspect and every sector of the Indian economy very closely. It also works very closely with government on business policy and also lobbies for business to create a better business environment. So let's begin. So the Keynesian model suggests that the government puts in a lot more expenditure to boost demand. And well, the government in its budget has already put in 4.13 lakh crores on the expenditure side, and now it's added an additional 25,000 crore rupees plus 12,000 crore rupees as loans, interest-free loans to the states. What immediate impact will this have for demand?
So let me start with a general answer before giving you the specific question. And the general point here is that this is unlike any other earlier shock, the pandemic. In the post-war world since 1947, India world has seen many demand shocks. Now this is the first one which is a combination of demand and supply shocks. So the point here is the standard Keynesian approach which has evolved or a neo-Keynesian approach has to be modified, differentiated and applied in a different way. So what I find is that 90% of the economists, good economists, are still taking it as if it's a standard shock and applying standard methods. So that's the main point I will make, but I won't go into the details and point it out how things can vary. Well, one of the important ways in which it varies is that given, normally in a Keynesian shock, you assume that you can just inject any kind of expenditures more or less into the economy, and that takes care of aggregate demand. Now, the peculiar thing about the demand supply shock is markets get fragmented. So if you just put in a general expenditure without thinking about the details, then that is likely to go to waste because it'll get caught in a way in parts of the system and just increase excess demand in that particular part without affecting the rest of the economy. So that is kind of the broad general thing.
The Keynesian model demands that government puts in more and more expenditure at a time like this. But we know that the budget has already earmarked on the expenditure side 4.13 lakh crore rupees in capex, that is for FY21. Now the government has talked of an additional 25,000 crores plus 12,000 crore rupees, which is a loan to the states, which is over a 50-year period. So that money has also been put into infrastructure and other capital assets. So how would you see this affecting demand in the near term?
So it is extremely important to spend on capex during a time like this, because not only does it improve the productivity in the economy, but it also creates jobs in the near term. Because any kind of capex requires some construction activity, whether it is roads or airports or ports, it will require a lot of construction, and construction is one of the biggest employers in the economy today. It is a labor intensive activity, and therefore the number of people employed will be high in the near term. So we need to increase our capacity to invest in projects. So very often what happens is that there is a allocation made by the government, but not all of it is not spent. So both at the central and at the state level, we need to increase our capacity to implement projects. And if that happens, I'm confident that this will have a good impact on demand.
What long-term impact will capital expenditure have on sustaining demand, sir? Because we see that, one thing is to create all the capital, but the other thing is also to sustain it and maintain it.
Right. So given what I said about supply demand shocks, I think, adding to it where we see the actual problems during the lockdown and the pandemic, we find that the biggest sufferers in a way from the data were consumer durables and construction. So capital goods is clearly one of the very important areas where a Keynesian injection was and is needed. So in that sense, picking out, injecting the money has both short-term effects, which is to revive the construction sector, which is the worst sufferer. If we look at the period from April to, let's say, June, July even, or up to August. So that is clearly a very positive classic Keynesian effect on construction. And then, of course, as you quite rightly point out, the long-term effects are even more important, because in an economy like India, where there is always this concern that India's debt is too high, it affects our ratings and it affects many other related matters, injecting capital into the infrastructure sectors creates both sustainable growth, sustainable employment, generates sustainable revenue, which has a positive effect, so to say, by reducing the debt. So clearly in an Indian context, given our history, but also the history of the pandemic so far, this is a very important and key part of the stimulus. Here, just mention one more, the second part you said about states. The states part is also important, because some of this stuff it needs complementary expenditures from the states. So I was very pleasantly surprised that some attention was given to that, this long-term 12,000 crore loan to states to use for infrastructure. Now, some people have said this is too small, but people keep looking at size by comparing with Western countries, US, this, that. I think that's completely wrong. I think I'm 100% sure that if this is effectively used by the states, because the usual problem is waste and inefficiency. So if it is effectively used, I'm sure the government will be happy to inject more, both at the central and state levels.
Right. So the important thing is to use it efficiently, and that's why the amount is targeted. What about the medium-term impact because of capital expenditure sustaining demand? Because once you create the infrastructure, then you have to maintain the infrastructure, and that, of course, is a long-term objective. I mean, you continue to maintain the infrastructure till kingdom come. But the point is that how much how much unlocking of demand will take place because of this?
So in the medium to long term, I would say that, of course, there is maintenance required. Otherwise, there is no point in creating infrastructure. But the most important impact of infrastructure creation is in the long term is that it improves the productivity of an economy. It lowers costs for businesses, say in transporting products, or even for a farmer to take his product to the market. It really helps to improve lower costs and therefore improve his productivity. And that's the real benefit of investing in infrastructure. But of course, it has to be maintained. There is no point in creating infrastructure which is not maintained. And both central and state governments need to spend enough on maintaining existing infrastructure.
Let's talk about another addition, which is 40,000 crore rupees to Manrega. This is part of the initial stimulus. To what extent has this, will this, sort of boost demand in the rural sector? We already see the rural sector doing reasonably well, but otherwise as well. I mean, in terms of livelihoods and basically demand boosting.
Yeah, right. So here we have to remember that essential commodities, which includes food and much of agriculture and much of allied services, were not locked down and were functioning, according to my data, at roughly around 95% of what they were about a year ago. but there are some segments of that, particularly things like milk, which go into production of sweets, which go into restaurants, hotels, etc., which were indirectly affected. So that demand was reduced because of that. So certain small segments of the rural areas may have been negatively affected. And then, of course, everybody talked about migrants who had migrated from rural areas to urban areas and the big issue which it became. So for these two categories of people, I think it was very important to announce that Manrega funds would not be a constraint. Overall, as you correctly noted, there was really not that much of a problem of unemployment in rural areas directly related to the pandemic. But because of these indirect effects, there was, segments or pockets of these things. And so it was a good thing. It was a very correct and useful decision.
There's also this additional 40,000 crore rupees that has been added to Manrega spending by the government. And this, of course, will unlock demand. But, to what extent, what kind of an impact do you think it's going to have on the rural economy?
So it is very important to spend on the relatively, say, the lower income segment of the population, which is the who are the people who will be taking up the Manrega jobs, because their propensity to spend is higher. They will not be saving that income, they will be spending that money. And that in turn will have a multiplier impact on the rest of the economy by raising demand for various products. We know that the rural economy is already doing well because of the spending that the government has been making. We know from things like tractor demand, for example, has been extremely high for the last several months. This is also because the monsoon has been good. But the spending on rural economy is critical because we have a large part of our population dependent on the rural economy, whether agriculture or other areas of work.
Also, the government has now come up with putting money in the hands of the government employees by the LTC encashment scheme and also the festival bonus. So what do you think? I mean, will this, first of all, to what extent will it boost demand in the economy, but will it have also a demonstration effect in terms of the private sector? Because most people are employed in the private sector. Will they be, called to do the same?
Yeah, so this is actually was a very intriguing announcement, and it actually relates to what you started with, which is the Keynesian stuff. So if we do a kind of aggregate analysis, what we find is that government servants and certain elements of the corporate sector were the ones which had the income and more income than they could spend during the lockdown. So their saving rates actually went up. And that's a classic Keynesian problem of excess savings. Okay. So the government didn't want to give huge incentive, clearly, because they already benefited in some indirect sense by having their employment, by getting normal wages. So I think it was a very clever effort to design some marginal incentives for them to spend the money which they had saved during the year, and which they may have been hesitant to save because of the uncertainties of pandemic, etc. It's a small measure, but I see it as an indicative of this careful thinking to address parts of the problems which have arisen in this segmented system, which I tried to outline right at the beginning.
Okay, putting money in the hands of government employees, that's the LTC encashment scheme, the festival bonus. Well, this will, of course, the government has control only over its employees, but, the question that I want to ask is something bigger. Will it have a demonstration effect on, on the private sector, for instance, to do something similar, so that there would be much more spending of employees across the board?
Yes, so it will have a demonstration effect, but private sector will look at what works best for them. So it is not necessary that every company will implement it. It is certain companies would do it. And here I'd just like to make one point. I had just said that the poorer people tend to spend all their money. In this case, it is sort of a middle income group that is being addressed, but the government measure makes sure that the money will be spent, because they have to show the vouchers, etc., for the money spent. So therefore, it will definitely have an impact on purchase of goods and services. They cannot just save that money. That is not possible in the scheme, in the way the scheme is designed.
Let's talk about consumer durables and trying to, increase demand there. There used to be consumer durable loans given by banks, or at least there still is, of course. But the offtake of these kind of loans, would they be increasing at this time, in the sense that the EMI kind of loans not just for not in the home loan category, but basically for cars, for fridges, and for these kind of consumer durables, will that help in unlocking demand?
So we are still not sure about what will happen. There has been an increase in the demand for consumer durables, mainly because of the pent-up demand. We know that cars, for example, where there is, after the year-on-year growth being negative, in the last 2 months, August and September, there has been a big jump in the growth rate of automobile, passenger vehicle growth. So that is pent-up demand, and then there is the festival season coming up, which typically leads to a ramp-up of consumer durable purchases. So these two factors will certainly lead to a jump in loans, in EMI kind of loans. However, we need to see whether this sustains beyond the festival period or not.
Right. What about the consumer durables? Because, even the LTC encashment is targeted for people to buy consumer durables. So if we see that, could bank finance also play a supporting role here in terms of, EMI lending, increasing credit card lending, so that people can buy consumer durables more than just, car loans and home loans?
Yeah, so certainly relating it to the previous question, because travel is a negative in a sense that people are afraid they may catch pandemic.
Yes.
So there would have been even less expenditures. They won't have used their LTC plus the expenditure they normally do during the travel, where they go home, they spend there. So it was very important to give a alternative avenue in which spending could take place. Now, as far as your the current part of the question is concerned, I think given this uncertainty about the pandemic, I don't think people are really going to go out and buy a number of things except those related to housing.
Okay.
I've just heard today, in fact, I've had kind of direct feedback, and it will show up in the data, is that because people were confined to the home, they are trying to improve their home environment. And one of the things which comes there is TVs, for example. People who didn't have or had inferior TVs because they just spend like a couple of hours at home have started going out and buying television sets. Okay. So in that sense, you're right. I think to some extent, at least as a temporary rise, this may encourage the availability of credit, may help in opening some of the home entertainment market, so to say.
And the role of banks in facilitating this?
So banks also are in a difficult situation today because they are not sure that the loans will be repaid. So unless they are 100% sure that these loans will get repaid, because a lot of income losses have happened, job losses have happened, they need some assurance from the government. So the government, in fact, has given a loan guarantee of 3 lakh crore for the medium and small scale segment. And there the banks are keen to go out and make do the lending, because they know that if the loans are not repaid, the government is there as a backstop.
Could there be, much more emphasis on this kind of lending to sort of boost demand?
They will take a decision on their own. If you look at the numbers right now, bank credit as a whole is not increasing in a very big way. But of course, the lending is lower to the corporate sector, whereas to individuals and private loans are still increasing. However, banks are a bit risk averse at this point of time because they are not sure that these loans will be repaid, and they have to be careful in extending those loans. So the government has done one very good thing for MSMEs, that is the medium and small scale sector. They have provided a loan guarantee. So up to 3 lakh crore loans can be given out by banks to the small scale sector, and these loans are guaranteed by the government, so that even if they do not pay back, the government will pay the money to the bank. So therefore, banks will not be as risk averse as they are being for other entities. They will go out and make these loans, and these are working very well. And a lot of the money has been lent out.
Fair enough. Let's talk about microfinance then and the rural economy. We know it plays a critical role there in the rural economy, but it's basically in the form of self-employment and creating small jobs. But then those jobs generate income, and obviously that will help in demand. And you earlier had said in one of your answers that the lower sections, or let's say the people with lower incomes, spend a lot of their income on survival. They don't save very much. So that's obviously important in terms of demand, boosting demand.
Yes, that is a very critical segment, and the government has also announced a few schemes in that segment, like the street vendors are being given loans, and there's also a scheme for the self-help groups. So these are all very important, but they need to add up to a significant amount before the job losses and the income, the livelihood losses. Actually, these are largely, they're not jobs in the sense that we talk about, but more of livelihoods. So the livelihood generation needs to come back to earlier levels.
And when we talk about credit, also what comes to mind is microfinance and credit at the smallest level. Of course, that is largely to support self-employment. But it's reports say that it's actually picking up right now. So what would you think? I mean, at the end of the day, even though it is self-employment, it leads to some sort of income generation, and then there's purchasing power, and so it should have a demand side effect, isn't it?
So it's very clear that actually microfinance and also small scale, at that level, even bank credit to individuals and households is a mix of consumer and, even though it may be said that, okay, this is consumer loan, this is a non-consumer loan, this is a employment, but it all goes because household industry, you can't distinguish, whatever they buy, they take a loan from. So it's a mix. So the big demand, what I am seeing is for revival of self-employment because, like these small traders, they need working capital. Okay. So if they can get that working capital, they will revive their industry. Same thing with microfinance being more important in the rural areas, non-bank financial companies. So these are all related at that level. It's hard to distinguish. So you are right. Even though my objective would, in my view, more important at that level is to provide the working capital so all these people can revive their industry. But some of that will, yes, definitely go into consumption. I mean, whether it's directly that credit or it's some other income which they have, then which they will be free to use for consumption, that's really not very important. So yes, both consumption and working capital will be benefit, and this will revive employment and economic activity.
And with that, we conclude our first episode on unlocking demand. I'd like to thank our guests, Dr. Arvind Virmani and Vidisha Ganguly.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure having talking to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much for being with us.